Good morning. Have we any visitors today? No visitors. From? Jersey City. Anywhere else? Am I missing somebody? Where from? Virginia. Anywhere else? Okay, everyone's gone back to school, huh? Well, welcome to all of you this morning. Today, as we look at the Scriptures, we see that Jesus has been telling in the last few weeks, as we go through the Scriptures, a series of parables, stories. And we see the story that he tells today about the man who owned the vineyard was really a retelling of a story from the book of Isaiah, which we read earlier, right? So he was simply dipping into the story that Isaiah had told many hundreds of years before Jesus. And he kind of put an extra twist or two into it. Now, the idea, this particular story about the vineyard has two purposes. One is it recounts for us in a very clear and precise way that what we call the history of salvation. That God came to Abraham and then to Moses. And Moses formed out of the loose tribes that claimed Abraham as their ancestor, the people that came to be known as the Hebrews. And the Hebrews then were given a land, and then they fell into worshiping false gods, and God became kind of upset with the covenant that they had made with him, and they weren't keeping it up. And so he sent prophets, and the prophets were all killed or driven out or abused. And now, finally, he sends his son. And that's the history of salvation. Now, Jesus tells that story by way of a parable. He makes God the owner of the vineyard, and then the tenant farmers are us. And then the ones that his servants that he sent were the prophets, and then finally his son. And look at the imagery. It says that they took his son out of the city and then killed him. What did they do with Jesus? Took him out of the city and then killed him. You see? So it was a prediction of his own death, amongst other things. So that's the biblical piece of it. It recounts for us the whole history of how God offers love, we accept it, and then we reject it. We accept it, and then we move off in other directions. We just can't seem to sustain our commitment. We just can't seem to sustain over the long haul the fact that God loves us. Now, we've all done that, right? How many in here remember their New Year's resolutions? How many of you can remember New Year's? Maybe a little tougher. How many remember what they were working on last Lent? You know, I'm going to be holier, I'm going to stop cussing, I'm going to stop doing whatever. Well, it lasts for a while, right? It's kind of like dieting, right? It lasts for a while, and then we lose our sight. And so that's been the whole history of us with God. Every time he reveals himself to us, we get all excited, but then we can't sustain it. So the message for us today is kind of clear that, first of all, we're all perfectly normal. That we're no different than people of the past. We're no different than people of the ages. That we too get all excited and then we forget. Now, Jesus figured there's a way that we can hedge this. And so when he established the church, he established it in such a way that there were all these great moments of life the community would gather. So when a baby's baptized, the baby's brought to church so that everybody can be reminded of God's love for them. The community gathers. And true of all the sacraments of the church, The community gathers. There are no private sacraments. And so Jesus understood that we forget. He understood that we are the people who just can't seem to sustain it. So we continually need to be reminded. We continually need to be called back to our roots and to our heritage. We need to continually be called back. And so the challenge of today's reading is for you to challenge yourselves this morning and ask yourselves, how is my relationship with God? Have I grown slack? Have I grown weak? Have I kind of backed off away from doing what I know is right? Is my energy about God's love for me just a little less than it used to be? Or has it never been ignited to begin with? I was at a meeting not so many years ago, and a priest stood up and said to the speaker, I just feel burned out with all this stuff. And the speaker said, "You were never on fire, Charlie. How could you be burned out?"